From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good Sunday afternoon. Welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Kate Walsh. This November, Massachusetts voters may be considering a ballot question on lifting the cap on charter schools. This effort is supported by Governor Charlie Baker, who in 2015 proposed legislation that would allow more charter schools. There are currently 81 in Massachusetts and 37,000 students on waiting lists for them. Today on 22 News in Focus, we'll be discussing charter schools and public schools and the merits and drawbacks of each type of system. People get passionate over this issue, but not many know what charter schools really are and how they operate. So we'll get into all the details and hopefully clear up some confusion for people, especially as they make up their minds before a possible vote on this in November. So joining me today are Rachel Romano, Executive Director at the Veritas Prep Charter School in Springfield, and Tim Collins, President of the Springfield Education Association. Thank you both for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So first, we're going to talk about your background in each of your systems. Rachel, can we start with you? What's your background with charter schools?
Sure. So I should go back to my background before charter schools. I actually taught in the Springfield Public Schools. I worked in the Springfield Public Schools for 6 years before joining the charter school movement as a principal and then founding a charter school in Springfield. So I'm currently the Executive Director of Veritas Prep Charter School in Springfield.
We'll talk more about this as well later, but what inspired you to move from Springfield Public Schools to the charter schools?
Well, I loved working in Springfield, still do love working in Springfield. And I think I began to crave more flexibility, more autonomy to make change happen faster for kids. You know, I saw that and felt that I was in a school where we were chronically underperforming, and despite like really good efforts at the school level, there were just a lot of things in the way of making change happen. And so I really started to crave to do the work in a place where we could really get down to business and do whatever it takes to make sure that children are successful.
So how did you first hear about charter schools in general and that mission? Was it back when you were in school yourself?
I was teaching, and I was teaching at Duggan Middle School in Springfield. And we had a great group of people there who really wanted to turn that school around and to do something different for children. And there weren't a lot of models of success happening in Springfield, so we started to look outside of Springfield. And we looked at communities, cities, where they were, there were schools serving similar population, but getting results. So I looked for any school I could find that was actually getting results. Kids were achieving at high levels, despite the fact that they were coming from low-income homes. And that their peers in their ascending districts weren't achieving at high levels. And so found these schools, didn't really know what they were at first, but went and visited one in New Haven, and then found a few more in Boston, went and saw them, and realized they were all charter schools. And they were all doing, they all looked different, they were all different, run by different people, but all doing really good work, and all places where kids were achieving at high levels. And I hadn't seen that yet in an urban school. So I became really inspired and started to think and dream about opening a charter school in Springfield.
Wow, okay. And Tim, you're on the other side of the coin. You work in the Springfield Public Schools and you represent the teachers there. Tell us about your background and your thoughts in general on this.
Well, I've been employed as a teacher in Springfield for 43 years. 25 years teaching in middle school, junior high school. But actually, I come to this issue with some deep concerns about all of the children in the city of Springfield. And my major concerns are twofold. Number one, the funding mechanism is not equitable. And there's between $32 and $33 million that come out of the Springfield Public Schools and go to the current charter schools. The second issue that's critical to me is currently and in Springfield, charter schools do not follow the law, which says they must reflect the student population of the district within which they reside. And the charter schools in Springfield do not have the same number of children who live below the poverty level. They don't have the same number of children who have special needs. They don't have the same number of children, percentage of children who are non-native English speakers, who are adjudicated in the juvenile justice system, who are in foster care. Yet they get the per pupil allocation. And I believe lifting the cap of charter schools is going to lead to two separate but unequal school districts within the city of Springfield. One that'll have the resources to meet the needs of all the children enrolled, and the other that won't. The one that won't is the true public schools, because we accept everybody and we keep everybody. One of the most insidious things about some of the charter schools in Springfield is that they counsel out or discipline out any child who would jeopardize their test scores, their graduation rate, and their dropout rate. To me, this is the civil rights issue of our time. Personally, I believe there is but one race, the human race. It's inclusive of all ethnicities, all colors, all economic statuses, and the charter schools in the city of Springfield at this point in time do not reflect that inclusive a model. And what I'm talking about is we accept every child, regardless of the challenges the child or the families face, and we keep them. And many of these charter schools send kids back to us who are going to make them look bad.
Can I respond?
Of course, this is what this is all about.
So we do agree on something that's really important. This is the civil rights issue of our time. Too many children are failing, dropping out of school. In Springfield, the charter schools have lower attrition rates, meaning that kids are staying in the charter schools more so than they're staying in their traditional public school. We have lower suspension rates, and we have lower dropout rates. That's true. It's true that charter schools are still working on mirroring the sending district. And so admission is done by lottery. Open to everyone, free public schools, but admission is chosen by lottery. And what we do is we work really hard to recruit students that will mirror the sending district. And I can't speak about every school's demographic, but I can tell you that at Veritas Prep, our students are more than 75% free and reduced lunch coming from low-income homes, which is on par with Springfield Public Schools.
Yeah, we're closer to 90.
I think last time I checked, you guys were 78% in your middle school. So I mean, we're pretty close. We are a little bit lower with special ed. We have 16% of our students are, on IEPs, and the district's at 19%.
But you don't have the most severe cases, which are the most expensive kids to educate.
It's my turn. And ELL students as well. And we in charter schools across the state, it is true that those numbers weren't comparable to like sending districts, and we're working really hard to enroll those kids. And equally important is how we're serving those kids. We do have students with severe special needs. We get students by lottery. So, and we're required, we're mandated by law to serve all special education students. And so we have kids from, mild, moderate disabilities who are included in their, in the general ed classroom, and we have kids who are coming to us with severe learning disabilities. And we, work really hard in a small school setting to accommodate all of those needs. MIT just did did some research, put out a study, and what they found is that students in the most severe special needs students are seeing the same kind of gains that general ed students are when they go to a charter school, and are achieving significantly higher rates than their peers who stayed in their district school. So, while we're working really hard to make sure that our populations do mirror the sending district, because we want to be credible, we want to serve all students. Equally important is how we're serving them, and we're doing a really great job with these subgroups of students.
How about the process of people knowing about charter schools, knowing to get into the lottery system to begin with? Are you finding that is a wide range of demographics, people knowledgeable about the charter school system in the first place, rather than just putting them in the public school because that's how it is.
Right, sort of this natural selection process that would happen by the more informed parents being the ones in the know. And I think that's how it used to be, frankly. And regulations have changed, and charter schools are under a lot of scrutiny about their recruitment practices. So what we do, and what most charter schools do, they'd be foolish not to because it's really easy. We get a list from our sending district from the grades, of the grades that we're enrolling, and we send direct communication out to all of those families. At my school, we actually send an application. We send an envelope, self-addressed, with postage. We make it as easy as possible for people to get into the lottery. We're really philosophically committed to serving the same population of students. Because we want this issue off the table, because it's just not true that we're trying to create, a two-tiered system. What we're trying to do is be part of the education reform solution, and be an alternative and a choice for public school parents who don't have access to high-quality educational options. They are zoned to the school they're in, and while there are some really great district, public schools in Springfield, many are not. Many are failing schools, and we want to give parents choice and option.
Well, the fact of the matter is that that's not true of all the charter schools in Springfield. I'm not even sure if it's true of Veritas, but severe special needs kids with feeding tubes, on wheelchairs, kids with severe autism, they are not in the charter schools. And the fact of the matter is that they are not servicing they're not reflecting the population of the students in the Springfield public schools. They don't have the same percentage of kids who are in foster care. They don't have the same percentage of kids who are adjudicated in the juvenile justice system. And if they wanted to do a lottery, they could do a lottery and sort the kids and make sure that severe needs, we're going to keep drawing from that pile of kids in a lottery until they equal our numbers. And they could do it for each of the categories, and they don't.
I volunteer. It's actually not it's not the statute, and what we're regulated to do is really clear, and it's not that. And folks who
statute
feel like
needs
I do,
to change if we're going to be fair and equitable.
I would love to see an opt-out lottery. So in other words, the lottery is done, they get in, and if they want to choose to leave, they can choose to leave. I would love to see something that.
And the waiting list is another myth too. You have kids who get on the waiting list of 6 different charter schools. If they get into one, they stay on the waiting list.
We're gonna interrupt here, and we'll be right back, and we'll talk about all of those issues in more detail in just a moment. But first, we'll take a break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about the issue of raising the cap on charter schools in Massachusetts. Our guests today are Rachel Romano, Executive Director of the Veritas Prep Charter School in Springfield, and Tim Collins, President of the Springfield Education Association. We've already got into some heated debate. We're going to continue where we left off a little bit, just to be fair. So we were talking about the wait list and the system of a lottery system to get people into charter schools. So Tim, you were talking about how you didn't like the wait list that have so many kids wanting to get into the charter school system.
Well, the Attorney General has done a study, and the wait list is not accurate. And the fact is that there are kids who are on several wait lists, and they're counted multiple times. So that the number is quite inflated.
So you're saying it looks like it's more students trying to get into charter schools than it might actually be in reality.
So I'll tell you what it is right now, so that we're talking about the right number. So right now there are 3,700 kids on charter school waitlist in Springfield, and that does not include duplicates. And it's true that there have been lists in the past where the numbers have been beefed up, because if there's a child on the waiting list, for my school, and he's also on the waiting list for Martin Luther King school, that child's been counted twice. So the number I just shared, 3,700 children in Springfield, does not include any duplicate numbers. So that's a lot of kids we're talking about.
But I just got some data, off the DESE website that shows that with Sabas and several of the other charter schools in Springfield, their enrollment year after year drops. So if there's this tremendous wait list, why aren't, when a kid leaves, another kid replaced them? And that's not the case. The enrollment clearly shows that.
So are you suggesting that people are dropping out of the school, or is it when they're done?
Kids are being counseled out
Well,
and sent back to the public schools, as I said before. If they're going to jeopardize the test scores, if they're going to jeopardize the graduation rate, they're going to jeopardize the dropout rate, they have this tendency, and I don't know how Veritas operates, but I do know several of the charter schools in Springfield send kids that are troublesome back to the Springfield public schools. And they do that by calling the parents in and telling them we don't have the resources, we don't have the services for your kid, or disciplining them. I was in Boston, and the NAACP in Boston talked about disciplining kids out, suspending them, holding them back grade after grade, and telling them, you know, if you go back to the regular public schools, we can move the kid up where he belongs.
I don't know any charter school that's doing that. You know, there may have been a time years and years ago that somebody, it most certainly doesn't happen at our school. And the charter leaders that I collaborate with and work with feel really strongly about getting the same population of kids, keeping and serving the same population of kids, and doing it much better so that we can be proof points in the cities that we serve. And so, you know, I can speak adamantly on behalf of myself and my own school and my own team. We most certainly don't do that. We want to serve the toughest kids. We like the challenge. That's why we're in this work. Our kids come to us 3-4 grade levels behind. And what we are trying to get really good at is getting them caught up and closing those gaps, because we want to be able to share those practices with district schools, and we want to be able to help more kids achieve at higher levels. We do not want to return any children to the district. We work really hard if parents are frustrated and, you know, want to leave, to keep everybody, and especially our most challenging kids. And I mean, that's really important to us.
So,
Well,
okay.
She's working really hard at getting there, which means they aren't there. And the data
That's not
proves
what I said.
it.
I said we're working really hard to get the same exact population, to serve them really well, and to keep them all.
But you're not there yet.
Well, Tim, I mean, what I said before earlier on was charter schools in Springfield have lower attrition rates, they have lower suspension rates, and they have lower dropout rates.
I'd like to see the data on that.
It's available on DESE's website.
And the fact of the matter is, there isn't a single child in a charter school who doesn't have a parent who's interested enough to be involved in their child's education by choosing the school. That can't be said of any school in the city of Springfield, true public schools. That's a difference.
Okay.
That's a big difference. You can't tell me that having parents interested doesn't make a difference in how kids perform.
First of all, I just want to say that's insulting to all of the children whose parents have them in a district school, some by choice, or some because they haven't been lucky enough to get in through the lottery. But we send, literally, the application and the envelope home with an address, with a stamp. We couldn't make it any easier. I don't think that the excuse of the parents don't care and they must care more at our school is why we're successful. It's just another excuse.
All right.
It's not an excuse.
Let's
it's a
change,
reality.
Let's change the topic now to something else. Let's talk about the typical day at a charter school versus a typical day at a regular public school. To explain to people at home how they're different and why, for some families, a charter school may seem like a more attractive option. Let's talk about the charter school day first. How is it different?
Well, I can't tell you much about, you know, another school schedule, but I can tell you about our school. So first of all, we do have a longer school day and we have a longer school year. And it allows us to do a lot more with our scholars. We know they come into us several grade levels behind, and it's our mission to really close those gaps, get them at or above grade level so they can compete with their peers in Longmeadow or anywhere across the state and the nation. So we have a longer school day so that we can offer them more time with literacy, you know, to really, you know, learn to read when they come to us as fifth graders. Many of them are not reading proficiently, certainly not at grade level. And we have more time with math, so we can do some inquiry-based math, and we can do some, you know, review math and some skill building. We offer science every day, social studies every day, so we're not offering more time with reading and math at the expense of any other core subject. And we also offer enrichment every day, so all of our students get music and they get physical education in their daily schedule. And one other thing that our longer school day, you know, gives us the flexibility to do is tutoring. So we hold a really high bar for our students. We expect them to achieve high levels, to behave really well, and we provide them a ton of support to do it. So with a longer day, we have a tutoring block every day, so every kid can get tutoring with their teachers. We also have 2 social workers, at our middle school, because we know that kids are going to come to us and struggle. They're not going to come to us meeting those expectations. So we do hold high expectations, but we also provide a ton of support, individualized support to get students there.
And how does that compare to a regular middle school day in a Springfield public middle school?
Yeah, similar. But I think you need to look at this historically and what's happened to the public schools, all of the public schools in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts since 1993 and since the advent of high-stakes testing. There was a time when I started teaching 43 years ago when we had shop classes, when we had home and career classes, when we had civics classes, when we had drama classes, when we had a number of areas in the school day where kids felt good about themselves, felt successful about themselves. And over the years, with this emphasis, overemphasis on standardized testing, the focus is on reading, language arts, math, and now science, because those are the things that are being tested. We're no longer educating the whole child the way we should be. And we've lost sight of the fact that those courses that I mentioned are pathways for kids who have an interest in them to read, to write, to learn mathematics. And this is universal with this insane standardized testing mania. And here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, whether it's MCAS or PARCC or MCAS 2.0, for gateway cities like Springfield and Holyoke and Fall River and New Bedford, it's a crooked yardstick. Our kids come to us significantly developmentally delayed educationally because of the circumstances in their homes and their neighborhoods. These tests are criterion reference tests, a fixed target. Don't measure the growth of the child towards the target, which is a true measure of the work that teachers are doing in schools, no matter what the school is. So there is a real problem here. And I could talk later on about 3 things that the legislature could do that would lift up all students. And the problem with charter schools is they deal with a select population. Well, they're not dealing with all the children. And the children that are left behind because of the funding formula that really drains the public schools and creates an inequity, lifting the cap is going to make things even worse for the vast majority of kids.
All right, and we'll talk about the financial issues, the pros and cons of both schools in a little bit, but first we're going to take another break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about the controversy surrounding charter schools. There seems to be a lot of misinformation out there. People just might not know what charter schools are all about and how they may differ and how they're also alike with the typical public school systems. First, I want to get back, before we get into more debate, I want to get back into what charter schools are and how they all came to be. So can you give us some history of charter schools and how it kind of separated from the regular school system in a city or town?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't necessarily separate from. Charter schools were created to provide alternative and choice for public school families. So they are free public schools available to everyone, admission by lottery, and the purpose is to provide an alternative or a choice. And I am dying to talk about standardized tests. You told me I could.
Yes, we will talk about that in a second. Still back on that though, how is it allowed? How did the state and the local cities and towns allow this to be money allocated away from the public school system?
So about 20 years ago, there was some federal legislation passed that encouraged states to create their own charter school laws. They encouraged the opening of charter schools in states, and states were able to decide how they were going to authorize or approve these charter schools and how they were going to hold them accountable. We have in Massachusetts, this is one of the hardest states in the country, maybe the hardest state in the country to get a charter. So they're not just handing these things out. There are about 5, maybe on average a year, and very few of the charters proposed to the Department of Education or the Board of Education actually get approved. And then the Department of Education oversees these charter schools. They're granted a 5-year charter, and they're held to really high standards of accountability around student achievement, around financial viability, and faithfulness to the charter that they proposed, what they said they would do. So we have a financial audit every year. We have a site visit from the department every year, and then have to apply for a renewal for the charter every 5 years. So a lot more flexibility, alternative and choice for parents, but with high stakes accountability.
And there's different charter school, not companies, not businesses, but programs, I guess. There's Sabas, there's others, we hear the same name in different cities. So are these businesses that are running these schools, how come they all have the same name and there's different mentalities, as we've been saying, from one charter to the
There are some that are run by private entities, some that are actually for profit. They're brought in, but in all charter schools, they are publicly funded, privately run schools. The people in charge of those schools are not elected by the people who are paying the bills, so they're not really true public schools. And initially, charter schools were supposed to be incubators for innovation, and they were supposed to share with the districts. That has not happened over the years.
Would you say the districts have learned it all from the charter schools?
They don't share. Sabas, for crying out loud, they patent what they're doing. Not that we'd want to do what they were doing, because then we'd be exclusive and we'd be sending kids away.
Would you say that is the mission that you are trying to share with
yeah, and I would say, case in point, charter schools, it's hard to disseminate with, and collaborate with people who don't want to collaborate. I mean, I think it's worth saying that. But we've done a great job of collaborating, and so many principals in Springfield and in Holyoke have been really open to collaboration. So, we've had many principals and school leaders come through our school. We just recently formed a partnership as part of Teach Western Mass, where we will have an obligation to disseminate and share with the district, middle schools in Springfield. And that's really exciting. That's what we want to do. We want to be part of the solution. We're not trying to take over. We're trying to do really good work for kids and then help to inform, efforts that can happen inside of a school district. And so we want to
credit where credit is due. I'll give you credit for that, but that's not the standard. Sabas International does not share a thing. They patent what they're doing, and they don't want to share. And quite frankly, when you look across this country, it's the corporate interests. The second biggest pot of public money out there is with education, second only to the military. And there are entities who are interested in getting their hands on that money. There's an $18 million fund ready to support Governor Baker's attempt to lift the cap.
Well, we have to raise some money if we have a chance against the $10 million that the teachers union is going to spend to deny parents' choice.
The teachers union doesn't have $10 million to spend. We do have people. We do have teachers, we do have parents, and we're going to use people power to explain the fact that this is going to be the resegregation of schools in places like Springfield and Holyoke and Fall River, and that new resegregation is going to be based on culture, it's going to be based on language, it's going to be based on special needs, and it's going to be based on economic status of the children in these schools. And all you have to do is look at the data from DESE across the board, on all charter schools, and that is the case.
All right, let me respond, because there's a lot of issues that have come up, and I'd like the opportunity to speak to a few of them. So it's true that Sabas is run by a for-profit management company. But the local control comes from a local board of trustees who hold the charter, and they choose to work with this company, Sabas. It helps them to get things like a facility and curriculum. There are 3 charter schools across the state of Massachusetts. There are no other for-profit management organizations in Massachusetts. So a school like mine, it's an independently run public school, open to everyone, governed by a local board of trustees, overseen by the state.
Fully funded by tax money?
By the public allocation for students. So if a middle school student in Springfield is in the district, right? They're in a district public school. They spend about $15,000 on that student. If that student's parents, send in an application, get into our lottery, then that student can come to our school. There's some deductions that are taken off the top, and we get a close to $12,000 allocated for that student. So we get paid for the student that we serve.
So you get paid less than a public school would pay?
Not if you go by category of student. If you go by severely disabled kids, if you go by kids who are not native English speakers, if you go by special needs kids, all of which they have a lower percentage than we have, those children are more expensive to educate. And another issue for the city is these charter schools can be located in any place in the city, and their kids are bused from everywhere in the city. And that is a big expense that comes off of the city's budget.
All right, again, I'm going to have to interrupt. We're going to take another break, but we will talk about the expenses, and we will get to standardized testing when we come back, because that seems like an issue you both are very concerned about and agree on a bit. So we'll be right back after this break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about the issues surrounding the expansion of charter schools in Massachusetts. It's something that's been controversial. We've had some nice debate here today for people to hear both sides of what's going on and really start to form an opinion if this does become a ballot question on the ballot in November. Now, Governor Charlie Baker has voiced his support many times for raising the cap on charter schools. We were just starting to talk about that a bit. Let's continue with you, Tim, first. Why don't you think that's a good idea?
Well, I kind of explained that.
Yeah.
I see that as the development of two separate but unequal school districts, both funded with public funds. And the fact of the matter is, I got a lot of respect for anybody who's teaching in a charter school or in a regular school in places like Springfield. An awful lot of respect for what people are trying to do. DESE has not done a good job of monitoring these schools. We've had in Springfield 3 charter schools that have gone out of business. Took 10 to 15 years for them to act. And what happens when they act and they close at the drop of a hat, we have to absorb them. That's another real problem for us. But the fact is that this Commonwealth and the House and the Senate spent a year studying the funding of education, and they came to the conclusion that funding for public schools is not adequate and it's not equitable, and they're not doing anything about that. Every child in the Commonwealth deserves to be in a school with a longer day, with summer school, with all the resources that they need so they can overcome. I've been at this for 43 years. And I know children facing these kind of challenges, given the proper circumstances, are resilient and they can succeed. But we need the resources, whether you're in a charter school or not. We need the resources to meet the needs of some kids, quite frankly, who have PSD, who are living under trauma. This Commonwealth is finally recognizing we got an opiate problem. In the city of Springfield and Holyoke and Fall River, we've been dealing with that for decades. Not only the problem, but the underground economy that supports that problem and has ravished families and neighborhoods. And those kids with that kind of trauma who come into the schools aren't as easy to deal with as kids who are coming in from better places to live, from solid families. But we don't throw those kids away. We need to help them survive and thrive, and we could do it if this Commonwealth would give us the resources to meet the need of every child, and they're not doing it.
And from what I'm hearing, you kind of agree on that there should be more funding.
I mean, I do, of course, and I would stand next to Tim and lobby for more funding for our schools, but I do want to say, again, we're serving the same kids. We're serving kids that have PTSD. We're serving kids whose family has drug addiction. We're serving kids in foster homes, and we're serving them better, and we aren't getting any more money. We have a longer school day because we want one, and our teachers choose to work inside of a school with a longer school day. We're doing all of the things I described before, not because there's more resources coming to us. In fact, there are fewer, but we want to do them because we believe they're the right things to do, and we're getting incredible results. you talked before about standardized tests, and I didn't get to say much then, but what I want to say now is I actually really disagree with Tim about standardized tests. Yes, it's hard, but it's not a crooked measuring stick. It's the same test. And you know what? I want the children in the school, in my school at Veritas Prep, and every child in Springfield to be able to pass a grade level test, because if they can't do that, well, by golly, they are not on their way to college, and they cannot compete with their peers from across the state, across the country. And so as long as we're saying that they shouldn't be able to pass a grade level test because they're coming from really extreme circumstances, many of them are, and they're already so far behind when they even start school, it's true. But it can be done. We've been doing it now for 4 years. Kids in our 8th grade right now came to us as 5th graders 4 years ago. Before they arrived at Veritas, 22% of them could pass a grade level math test, as 4th graders. 39% of them could pass a grade level reading test as 4th graders. Right now, 76% of them are scoring proficient or advanced on math PARCC test, and 85% of them on the ELA PARCC test. And that's what you can do when you get a group of people rowing in the same direction who believe it's possible and who are willing to do whatever it takes.
Would you both agree that there's too much emphasis right now on the standardized test, though, in general, or are you for all?
I agree with Tim that, I wish that we did have shop in our schools and other things in our schools, which is why we have a music program and why we have phys ed. But I think it's really important. I think it's most important in our urban districts where otherwise kids would just be failing under this guise of, all of these excuses that we make. And see, we don't see them as excuses, we see them as the challenges. We know what we're signing up for. We know it's going to be a lot harder than it is in the town next door. Those are the challenges, but we know we can do it because we're serving children who are smart, who are bright, who have tons of potential. And so I don't think there's too laser focus on standardized test scores. I think we have to get all of our kids to grade level proficiency if they stand a fighting chance in the world.
And I have no argument with that. I do disagree, however, that a grade level test is not MCAS and a grade level test is not PARCC. They're criterion reference tests, they're fixed targets. They do not measure the growth of the child towards the target. And quite frankly, anybody who studied the development of children, they develop at different levels at different times. They have different learning styles. Some kids, project-based learning is the way for them to go, and they really can shine with that. But we've narrowed our focus so much because the only measure that people are looking at are these standardized tests. There's many other measures. Quite frankly, there's a whole lot more to human growth that can be measured on any standardized test. Being good citizens, being resilient, being able to stick with difficult tasks to fruition, having some grit, being polite, knowing how to be a decent human being. These are important things that need to be taught. And in far too many cases, the only place they're being taught is in the school, not in the neighborhoods like they were when I grew up. So there is a big difference with what's going on in communities like Springfield and Holyoke and in Weston and in Long Meadow. And to say that that's not the case is to ignore the fact that we need to educate the whole child. And it's this overemphasis on standardized tests that has eliminated schools actually educating the whole child.
I agree with him and all of the things that he's talking about in terms of character and and grit and tenacity and these things, and we in manners, and we spend a lot of time teaching those at my school and have a character ed program to do that. But you can't do that at the expense of teaching kids to read, write, and do math. You just can't, because those are the basic academic skills that they need to go on and further their education and get good jobs and contribute to our economy. And
you can do it and teach reading, write,
totally.
and math. The fact of the matter is that if a kid is in a wood shop or a metal shop, mathematics is a big part of it. If they're in a culinary arts class, mathematics is a big part of it. And some kids who struggle in the classroom but like that are willing to take on the tough task, and there is crossover. And we've lost that in our school districts because if it's not tested, it's not valued.
All right, we'll talk more about that in just a second. We're going to take another break, and we'll be right back. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We've been talking about charter schools and public schools and the issues and the debate on whether or not to lift the cap on charter schools this year, as Governor Charlie Baker has been proposing time and time again. We've listened to the pros and cons of both types of schools. Let's talk about the teachers. Now, obviously, Springfield Public Schools has teachers union, which you're representing. You don't have a teachers union.
We do not, no.
How are teachers represented if there were to be a problem?
Well, they simply walk into my office. Ooh, did I drop my mic?
That's okay.
And they have a conversation. Most of the changes that we make in our school are driven by teachers. So we really empower teachers. Our teachers could unionize at any time. They choose not to. Yeah, I mean, we're a place where teachers have, because our teachers could unionize at any time, we need to listen to them. Teachers are where the rubber meets the road. Teachers are serving our kids every single day, and they're driving results. So in our school, we as leaders really believe in supporting our teachers and doing whatever it takes to make sure that nothing gets in the way of teaching and learning for them. And so, we provide a lot of support for teachers. They have a coach and they get weekly feedback. We also solicit weekly feedback from them. So every Friday we have teachers filling out, a survey giving us feedback. So we just keep communication really open and we try to keep it simple. We're all good people doing the work, working really hard. A lot of respect.
Is it like a public school where the teachers have to have a master's degree after a few years of teaching? Charter
schools are public schools, and we're held to the same expectations around standardized testing, around teacher licensure. If anything, charters are under a lot more regulation and scrutiny because we're given the opportunity to be a public school operating independently. So yeah, we have all those same regulations.
Well, that's not my experience, and not necessarily with your charter school, but there are charter schools in Springfield who have people year after year who aren't licensed teaching kids. There are charter schools in Springfield who the teachers are told if you talk about what you're making to anybody else, it's grounds for being fired. So she's describing the kind of a situation that would make for a school that works when you've got the leadership in the school that's actually listening to the teachers and the people doing the work and responding to their needs. I mean, that's ideal. You'd like to have that in every school. Doesn't exist in all of our charter schools in the city of Springfield or across this Commonwealth. And the fact of the matter is that there are some charter schools who do well. There are several of our public schools who are level 1 schools and are doing well as well. But in the overall, that isn't necessarily the case. We've had 3 charter schools who went out of business. It took a long time for them to go out of business. So they aren't being monitored and watched the way our public schools are.
What I would say, have you ever seen a district school go out of business? I mean, not that I like any school to go out of business.
Look at the city of Holyoke.
True.
Look at the city of Holyoke. Look at it, Lawrence. Don't tell me that isn't happening. It's happening. There are schools in Fall River that are under those circumstances.
But those schools operated for more than 10 years.
Can you name me one charter school that's a level 4 school and under the gun for the state?
No, because most aren't level 4 schools.
No,
they're
test scores. They're in the bottom 20%, just like the level 4 schools are, but they aren't named because DESE doesn't treat them the same way, and that's a fact.
I mean, DESE closes them, so I don't know how you could say that. I mean, charters get a 5-year term.
Took 15 years for one of our schools to be closed.
But
on probation.
Most of the schools in the district have been operating for come on, many more years than that, chronically underperforming, and they're not closed. Look at the district's middle schools right now. It's the 5th generation of turnaround work. It's great, it's promising. I think it's the best it's ever been because they're giving charter-like autonomies to the middle schools in Springfield, and they're attracting strong leadership because of it. And I think it's exciting. I actually think it's the first chance that we've had at actually turning those schools around, and I'm really excited about it and look forward to supporting it in any way we can. But I mean, to say that things don't work as a charter school closes, to me that's what makes it work. That's high stakes accountability. If my school's not performing like we promised we would, close us down. And I think
but
I think
the
all
fact
schools
is
should have autonomy
it
and
rarely happens. It rarely happens. And when it does,
it's happened like 2 times in Springfield in the last
2
5
times,
years.
and it took 10 years in one case, actually 3 times, 10 years in one case, 15 years in the other case, and it took documented cheating on the MCAS and malfeasance as far as the money goes in the other case.
Yeah, and that school was closed that next year. You know, that school wasn't allowed to operate another year.
That was going on for several years.
I want to talk about the students. In a situation like that, I heard you say a little bit earlier, if a charter school were to close, the students would then get moved back into the public school system. I know charter is public, but you know what I mean, the Springfield public school system. How would that hinder their ability to learn? Would you say, or would you say that they would go back into the system
Well,
stronger?
I got to tell you, the charter school's closing is probably for good reason, you know, and they were, you know, in the case that Tim's talking about, the school got closed, they were cheating on their test scores, and it's despicable. And I don't think those children were learning there, so I don't think it would hinder their opportunity to learn. You know, not every charter school is the same, and so I could never stand here and stick up for a charter school that did, or any school that cheated, because it doesn't just happen in charter.
Child is moving to a new school, that's a setback for them. There's a whole new group of kids. One of the things that the charter schools in Springfield have, another advantage that they have, is that if the child's family moves for some reason from one place to another, that in Springfield participates a change in school. And change in school means you got a whole new group of friends to make, you got a whole group teachers to get to know, parents aren't familiar with the schools. That is a disadvantage. Yep. And what drives that is the cost of busing. The state used to pay for the cost of busing because we were under mandated desegregation, and they stopped that several years ago. And that's a problem that you don't have to face, that we face.
How about students who graduate, so to speak, from your school in 8th grade? Where do they go? Do they end up going to private schools? Do they go back to Springfield High Schools?
Yeah, so this is our first class of 8th graders. It's a really exciting time for us, actually. And the vast majority of them, if they aren't like moving, a couple of them are going to a charter school, but the vast majority of them, all but say like 5, are going back to the Springfield Public Schools, which I think is really cool. I mean, and these are kids who are proficient or above on their, you know, standardized tests, and they are like geared up on a college, you know, prep track. We've been working closely with Central High School. 40% of our kids got into Central, and we're working with Putnam and the other schools to make it a smooth transition. And you know, these are kids who are going to graduate from high school. We're going to make sure they do. And these are kids who are going to go off to college. So you know, this is all, you know, this really lifts all boats.
Would you say that it changes the demographic in a high school when these charter kids are coming into it?
Well, every kid in a high school entering in 9th grade is new to the school. So, I mean, we get a ton of children who move into the city and out of the city. My recidivism rate is unbelievable. And that's another advantage that some of these charter schools have, because they do have more stable families in some cases. One of our level 4 schools on the elementary over a 3-year period had 115% change in student population. 115%. You know, it's hot. You got to be consistent. Kids need consistency in their lives, but if they're bouncing from neighborhood to neighborhood and out of the city and back into the city, I mean, it's a whole different set of challenges. You know, and what we're looking for is a level playing field. And I think charter schools is not addressing the problem. The problem exists in all schools that are facing the kind of challenges that the city of Springfield, Holyoke, and other urban areas where you've got abject poverty, where you've got crime, where you've got, you know, and I'm not saying these kids can't learn, and many of them do, but
not enough of them, Tim. I mean, that's the thing. We have kids facing the same issues, and they're learning. And more kids need access to high quality schools. And you know, charters aren't looking to take over the city or take over the world, but where we can serve more kids, where we can be, you know, a proof point for the city, where we can help to influence change in our public schools. We need kids.
When you look at lifting,
I'm sorry, that's where we're going to have to wrap it up. It's been a very interesting debate. I wish we had another hour, but we're going to have to take another commercial break, and we'll be right back. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. We've spent the last hour discussing and debating the differences and the merits of charter and public schools, as well as what can be done to improve the quality of education for students in Massachusetts. So thank you to Rachel Romano, Executive Director of the Veritas Prep Charter School in Springfield, and Tim Collins, President of the Springfield Education Association, for your insights today. It's been very interesting, educational, and we want you to know that you can find everything on our website as well, wwlp.com. That's our show. Have a great Sunday.